September 17, 1944, 11:23 a.m. Outside Error, France. Private First Class Eddie Kowalski crouched inside a Sherman tank that stank of cordite, sweat, and blood. Outside, the morning sun lit up the village ruins of Error. Inside, the steel walls shook with every distant explosion. 400 yards ahead, a Panzer IV had just broken through the tree line. Turret swiveling, gun barrel rising like it was searching for a throat. Kowalski wasn't supposed to be in the gunner's seat. He was the loader, 20 years old. He'd never fired the 75mm main gun in combat. Never aimed it. Never even trained on it. But the gunner was dead, slumped over, face gone, blood dripping onto the ammo rack. The tank commander, Lieutenant Carson, was hit too, pressing a field dressing into his shoulder, trying not to pass out. Kowalski had seconds. The Panzer fired first. The German shell screamed past the Sherman's nose, so close it tore the air apart. The entire tank rocked sideways. Kowalski's ears rang like bells in a church fire. He could taste copper. The turret vibrated with fear and steel. He turned toward Carson, looking for orders. Carson met his eyes, pale and sweating, and said just one word. Shoot. Kowalski climbed over the bloody body of the gunner and dropped into the seat. His hands were shaking. He grabbed the handles, looked through the periscope. The Panzer was reloading. He could see the breech open, the loader inside the turret. Maybe 20 seconds. He tried to aim, but the sight was wrong. The gun's optics were set for 600 to 2,000 yards. The German tank was too close. 400 yards. The crosshairs floated above the target like a taunt. No lower setting. No time to adjust. The lower hull, the sweet spot, was blocked by brush and debris. Standard doctrine said, go for the tracks. Immobilize it. Then flank. But he couldn't even see the tracks. No options. No training. Just adrenaline. Then Kowalski's boot kicked something. A small, cracked mirror, maybe 5 inches across, lying face up on the turret floor. A cheap shaving mirror. Belonged to Hayes, the gunner. Used it to check his teeth after lunch, to shave on cold mornings. Useless. Silly. Not anymore. Kowalski grabbed it. The Panzer's barrel was leveling. 10 seconds. He held the mirror above the periscope, angled it carefully, just enough to reflect what the gun sight couldn't reach. And there it was, the lower hull, the driver's viewport, the weak spot, barely 50 millimeters of armor. He lined it up. The Panzer fired again. The German round hit the Sherman's glassy plate, punched clean through the front armor, and ripped out the back. But it didn't explode. Just a perfect, deadly tunnel of steel. A few inches higher, and Kowalski would have been cut in half. Pure luck. Smoke filled the turret. Metal groaned. But the Sherman was still alive. Kowalski squeezed the trigger. The 75mm gun roared. The turret recoiled hard. For a second, he thought he'd missed. Couldn't see anything through the smoke. Then he saw it. The Panzer frozen in place. Black smoke poured from the hatches. The tank didn't move. One shot. One kill. With a cracked mirror. Carson stared at him, blood soaking through his field dressing. What the hell did you just do? Kowalski didn't answer. Because 2 more Panzers had just crested the ridge, 300 yards out, maybe less. Both turrets turning toward the Sherman. And he still had the mirror in his hand. 4th Armored had already lost 47 Shermans since crossing the Moselle. Kowalski's tank, call sign Bad News, had somehow survived 6 engagements. Mostly by luck. They'd hit Panthers from the side, from behind, never head-on, never at 400 yards with a loader manning the gun. Until today. But the real problem wasn't just armor. It was visibility. The Sherman's M70 gun sight worked well between 600 and 1,500 yards, standard engagement range. But under 400 yards? The sight couldn't depress low enough to aim at an enemy's lower hull. All a gunner could see was the upper turret. And trying to punch through the turret front on a Panther or a Panzer IV was suicide. The frontal turret armor was 110 millimeters thick. The 75mm shell would bounce like a BB off a brick wall. Tankers had a name for that range. The dead zone. Too close to aim properly. Too far to ram. If you found yourself in the dead zone against a Panther, doctrine said one thing. Reverse. Pull back. Get distance. Get help. But Kowalski couldn't reverse. 2 more Panzers sat on the ridge, 300 yards out, spread wide. One flanking left, one right. If he backed up, he'd expose the Sherman's thin side armor. If he stayed put, they'd bracket him. One shot from each side. No escape. No margin. Carson's radio crackled. Battalion HQ requesting a status report. He didn't answer. He was too busy watching his loader. His loader hold up a cracked shaving mirror like a battlefield magician. The lead Panzer fired. The shell slammed into the dirt 20 yards short, kicking up a geyser of dust and smoke. A ranging shot. The next one would hit. Kowalski had 8 seconds. He adjusted the mirror, tilting it just right above the sight, watching the world reflect back in reverse. The Panzer's hull came into view. The lower plate. The viewport. A narrow 12-inch rectangle of steel. A perfect shot, if he could land it. He pressed the trigger. The 75mm cannon fired. The Sherman bucked under recoil. Smoke flooded the turret. When it cleared, Kowalski saw the Panzer erupt in a blast of fire and shrapnel. Not just smoke, fire. The entire front of the tank peeled open like a crushed soda can. The driver's hatch blew off. Flames climbed 30 feet in the air. Ammunition cooked off inside, one detonation after another. He'd hit the ammo rack. 2 kills. 2 minutes. The 3rd Panzer turned to retreat. Kowalski didn't let it. He tracked it through the mirror, adjusting as the tank pulled away. For 100 yards. For 20. For 150. It was trying to escape the dead zone, trying to reach a distance where its own optics could lock in. Kowalski fired again. The shell slammed into the rear engine deck. The Panzer rolled forward another 10 yards and died. Black smoke poured from the grills. The crew bailed out, running for the Treeline. Kowalski didn't fire again. They weren't a threat anymore. 3 Panzers. For minutes. 1 broken mirror. Carson grabbed the radio, voice shaky. Battalion, this is bad news. 3 enemy tanks destroyed. All 3 confirmed kills. There was silence. Then, say again, bad news. Did you say 3? Affirmative. 3 Panzer IVs. For minutes. Another pause. What's your crew status? Carson looked around the turret. The blood. The smoke. The cracked mirror still in Kowalski's hand. Battalion, you wouldn't believe me if I told you. But word spread fast. By that afternoon, every tank commander in 4th Armored Division wanted to know what had happened at Era. How a loader with no gunnery training had knocked out 3 German tanks in 4 minutes. How he'd done it at point-blank range, inside the dead zone, with a sight that couldn't even see the target. And how he'd done it with a 5-inch shaving mirror. What they didn't know yet was just how bad the dead zone problem really was. American tankers had been complaining about it since Normandy. Everyone knew the issue. Below 400 yards, the M4 Sherman sight couldn't depress enough to target the most vulnerable parts of enemy tanks. You could see turrets. You could see sky. But you couldn't see the weak spots, the driver's hatch, the lower plate, the joints between armor seams. The Sherman's periscope sat high in the turret. The gun barrel sat low. At long range, that offset didn't matter. But at knife fight distance, it meant death. The angle worked, barely. But at close range, geometry failed. The periscope sat too high, the gun too low. You were shooting blind, guessing where the target was, hoping to hit steel instead of dirt. Most crews didn't. In July 1944, near St. Lo, a Sherman platoon from the 2nd Armored ran into 3 Panthers. Range, 300 yards. Not one Sherman got a shot off. The Panthers were in hull-down positions, only their turrets exposed. The Sherman gunners aimed low, hoping to hit hull. Every shot missed or bounced. All 5 tanks destroyed in 90 seconds. August, near Mortain. Another close engagement. For Shermans versus 2 Panzer IVs. Range, 250 yards. The Americans tried to flank, sprint in for a side shot. 1 made it. The other 3 burned. The problem was simple. By the time you got close enough to flank a German tank, you were already in the dead zone. And in the dead zone, the Panzer could see you perfectly. You couldn't see it. The Ordnance Department knew. Reports came in all summer. Tank commanders asked for new optics, adjustable sights, lower periscopes, anything that could give gunners visual on close-range targets. The answers were always the same. Under review. Pending evaluation. Future modification possible. Translation, not happening anytime soon. So, the crews improvised. Some gunners stacked ammo crates behind the seat to raise themselves higher over the gun sight. It didn't help. The angle was still wrong. Others marked grease pencil lines on the periscope, trying to estimate offsets for close-range targets based on past engagements. It worked, barely, if the terrain was flat, if the tank was the same model, if you had time to think. In combat, you never had time. Staff Sergeant Mike Diageo from 3rd Armored tried a new trick. He brought a dentist's mirror into his Sherman. Small, circular, swivel handle. His loader would look through the periscope, call out angles. Diageo adjusted the mirror to try and catch a glimpse of the lower battlefield. It almost worked, but the mirror was too small, a 20 degrees field of view, not enough to track a moving tank. 2 days later, Diageo's Sherman took a direct hit. He survived, barely. Burns to the face and hands. 3 weeks in a field hospital. When he came back, he left the mirror behind. The 4th Armored Division tried a different route. They requested early delivery of the new M4A3, the upgraded model with a redesigned sight system and a lower-mounted periscope. Better angles. Better visibility in close-quarters combat. They submitted the request in early August. The answer came in mid-September. Production already allocated to priority theaters. Estimated delivery, December 1944. For months away. The Battle of Arras was happening now. On September 16th, Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams, commander of the 37th Tank Battalion, called a meeting. Every Sherman commander attended. Abrams didn't waste time. The situation was deteriorating. 5th Panzer Army was pressing hard. Contact distances were shrinking, 200 yards, sometimes less. Fights were happening in villages, forests, tight farm roads where long-range gunnery didn't matter. We need to figure this out, Abrams said. If we don't, we'll lose half our tanks before we reach the German border. One commander suggested backing up whenever possible. Keep distance. Avoid the dead zone. Abrams shook his head. Patton doesn't back up. Neither do we. Another officer proposed ambush tactics. Hide. Flank. Always strike from the side. Abrams nodded, then asked, "And what happens when they see you first?" Nobody answered. The meeting ended at 4:30 p.m. 16 hours later, outside a burned-out French village, a 19-year-old loader named Eddie Kowalski would pick up a cracked shaving mirror and solve the problem nobody else could. But first, he had to survive the night. Because the Germans weren't finished at Arras. Not by a long shot. And the dead zone was about to get a whole lot more deadly. The response from battalion was immediate. Hold position. Do not move. Battalion commander en route. Lieutenant Colonel Creighton Abrams arrived 30 minutes later. His jeep skidded to a halt in the churned-up mud beside the Sherman Bad News. He climbed onto the hull, leaned over the turret, and looked inside. Kowalski was still in the gunner's seat. The broken mirror lay across his lap. Abrams reached in, picked it up. 5 inches across. Cracked through the center. A shaving mirror. Nothing tactical about it. "Show me," Abrams said. Kowalski nodded, shifted into position. He held the mirror above the periscope, angled it at 45 degrees. The reflection bent the view downward, past the gun sight's normal field, down to the terrain about 300 yards out. Abrams crouched, watching over his shoulder. "Again," he said. "Slower." Kowalski demonstrated. The Sherman's periscope looked straight ahead, fine for long range. The sight aligned with the periscope, but the gun barrel itself was lower. At 800 yards or more, the geometry worked. The shell dropped into the target zone. But at 300? At 200? You saw turret. You saw sky. You didn't see the hull. The mirror changed that. Held just right. It gave a new angle, not from the gunner's perspective, but from 8 inches higher. And 8 inches was enough. In the mirror's reflection, the lower hull came into view, the driver's viewport, the weaker glassy plate. Vulnerable steel. How do you know where to aim? Abrams asked. Same crosshairs as always, Kowalski said. But I watched the reflection, not the direct line. And for different ranges? Trial and error. At 300 yards, about 40 degrees. For 100 needs maybe 35. I just tilt until the hull shows up in the center. Abrams said nothing. He looked up at the ridge, at the blackened husks of 3 burning panzers. Then back at the mirror. Then back at Kowalski. How long did it take you to figure that out? About 5 seconds, Kowalski said. Right before the first panzer killed us. Abrams climbed off the tank. He called over the other commanders, 12 in total, all within shouting distance. They gathered in the dirt, tense, skeptical. He held up the mirror. This loader just solved our dead zone problem, Abrams said. With this. One of the commanders snorted. Sir, that's a shaving mirror. Abrams didn't smile. That shaving mirror killed 3 Panzers in 4 minutes, from the front, at ranges your gun sights can't touch. Now shut up and pay attention. He ordered Kowalski to demonstrate again. This time, 12 officers crowded the turret, watching every movement. How he held the mirror, the angle, how to find the hull in the reflection, how to adjust for range, how to track a moving target. It looked ridiculous, awkward, improvised. But 3 smoldering wrecks on the ridge made it undeniable. It worked. One commander asked, "Field of view." "That thing's tiny. You don't need wide view," Kowalski said. "You just need the hull. That's all. The mirror shows about 30 degrees. Enough to track one target." Another said, "What if it breaks? What if it falls?" "Then you're blind again," Kowalski said. Back in the dead zone, Abrams cut in. "Every tank in this battalion will have a mirror by sundown. I don't care where you get them. Medics, mess kits, French bathrooms, get it done. Every gunner gets one. Every loader carries a backup." The commanders dispersed like a fire drill. Within 2 hours, 4th Armored Division launched a mirror scavenging operation. Tankers fanned out through the village of Error. They knocked on doors, offered cigarettes, chocolate, army scrip, anything. One request, mirrors, 4 inches or larger. Some villagers refused. Most didn't. By dusk, 47 Shermans had mirrors mounted beside their gun sights. Some were taped to the periscope housing, some tied down with bootlaces. Others just held in place by trembling fingers. But having a mirror wasn't enough. Using it was a skill. The angle had to be right. Too steep, and all you saw was dirt. Too shallow, sky. And you had to hold it steady, while the tank bounced, while the turret rocked, while the world exploded around you. That afternoon, Kowalski ran his own boot camp. He trained the other loaders. Tank after tank, crew after crew. He showed them the grip. 2 fingers on the edge, thumb on the back. Keep it loose. Keep it level. Don't flinch. A cracked mirror. A 75mm gun. A problem no engineer could solve. Fixed by a 19-year-old with bloody gloves and 5 seconds to think. They bend angles. And when a mirror is cracked, each half becomes its own surface. 2 mirrors, 2 angles, 2 separate reflections. A human brain can't process both at once. It chooses one and ignores the other. But if the image you choose isn't the one aligned with your gun, you miss. And at 300 yards, a miss is the difference between surviving and burning alive. Kowalski stared at the cracked glass in his hand. He thought about Corporal Hayes shaving in the turret, about how dumb they all thought the mirror was. A stupid personal thing. A joke. Now it was battlefield equipment, critical as a gun sight, and his was broken. He didn't have a spare. Carson handed him his own compact mirror from his jacket pocket. Got it off a nurse back at Metz. Don't ask. Kowalski swapped it in. Smooth glass, no cracks, no distortion. He adjusted it, found a burnt-out truck 350 yards out, and fired. The shell hit dead center. Direct hit. The mirror worked. By noon, word of the failure had spread. Abrams ordered all mirrors inspected for cracks, distortion, uneven backing. Crews raided French pharmacies, salons, shops for replacements. The division requisitioned a shipment of makeup compacts from Army supply depots, small, but high-quality mirrors, easy to hold. Gunners called them Cowalscopes. A few tankers etched EK into the corners for luck. The dead zone wasn't gone. The Shermans were still outgunned, still out-armored, still vulnerable. But they could see, and that meant they could shoot first. Kowalski never got another kill like the one at Era. But he stayed alive. So did Carson. So did most of 4th Armored. The mirror technique spread fast. By late October, it had reached 9th Army. By December, Shermans in Belgium were using them at Bastogne. Some were even mounted with clamps welded in place. Unofficial, unapproved, but real. The Ordnance Department finally took notice. In February 1945, they issued a technical bulletin recommending auxiliary reflective sights for close-range engagement, a sanitized way of saying the mirror trick. It was the first time the Army officially acknowledged the dead zone even existed. Kowalski received no medal, no citation, no commendation. He didn't care. He wasn't looking to be remembered. But in the field manuals that came out after the war, under the section titled Close Engagement Techniques for M4 Medium Tank, there was a single paragraph that began. He took a breath, lined up the crosshairs. The tank was moving broadside, perfect shot, textbook. Hollis was about to fire when the Panther's turret snapped toward him, fast, sudden, like it had already been watching. The Panther fired. The shell hit dead center on the Sherman's turret ring, the most vulnerable part of the entire tank. The blast sheared through the armor, killed Hollis instantly, decapitated the commander. The loader dove out the side hatch and survived, the only one who did. The after-action report blamed bad luck. But the crew in the Sherman next to Hollis said something else. They'd seen a flash, a flicker of sun off glass, just seconds before the Panther turned and fired. And that's when Kowalski realized the truth. The mirrors weren't just helping them see. They were helping the enemy see them. German optics were good. Zeiss lenses, high-grade scopes, far better than anything in the Sherman. A glint of light above a turret was all it took for a Panther gunner to know where to shoot. And they weren't guessing anymore. They were prioritizing targets. Shermans using mirrors were getting hit first. So Abrams issued a new order. All mirrors had to be darkened. No polished glass. No sunlight. Crews used soot, engine grease, anything to dull the shine. Some mounted the mirrors inside black hoods, only opening them when firing. Others placed them under fabric flaps with slits, crude, makeshift gun sights built from tarps and wood. But the Germans adapted again. They started watching for behavior. If a Sherman stopped moving at 400 yards and didn't fire immediately, it meant the crew was adjusting the mirror. And that made them a target. The solution was obvious, but brutal. You had to fire blind, then use the mirror to correct, shoot fast, adjust fast, fire again. First shot for pressure, second for damage. Crews called it splash gunning. The goal wasn't precision, it was speed. Create smoke, disorient the enemy, hit something. Then use the mirror before the enemy spotted the glint. It worked, sometimes. Sometimes it didn't. On September 22nd, Abrams finally received word from Ordnance Command. They were sending a prototype. A field-adjustable reflective periscope designed for short-range fire. Aluminum casing. Wide field of view. Sloped housing to prevent glare. It had been developed months ago, but never prioritized. Now it was urgent. One prototype arrived by air the next morning. Abrams gave it to Kowalski. Mounted it to bad news. He used it 48 hours later, at the Battle of St. Mart's, and killed 2 Panthers from 300 yards. No mirror, no reflection, just the clearest sight picture he'd ever seen. It was too late to save Ray Hollis. Too late to change what the mirrors had cost. But Kowalski kept his, the original, taped together, cracked, blood-streaked. He carried it through the rest of the war. Never used it again. Didn't need to. But sometimes, after a battle, after the tank cooled and the adrenaline faded, he'd take it out. Not to aim, just to look, just to remember. He thought about the glint of light that had given him away. Thought about the precision of the shot, not random, not panicked, but deliberate, calculated, aimed like a sniper. A direct hit, 6 inches above the periscope. A kill shot designed not just to destroy the tank, but to erase the man holding the mirror. Kowalski finally said, "They're not firing at tanks anymore. They're firing at hands. That's not war. That's execution." Carson didn't reply. The next day, Abrams made a call to division headquarters. Not a request, a demand. He told them plainly, "Get us optics that work at 300 yards. Get us periscopes that track hulls, not sky. Get us something, anything, that wasn't made of bathroom glass and desperation." The response was silence. Then, "We're aware of the problem. We're reviewing solutions." Too late. The mirror days were numbered. Some crews kept using them, not because they trusted them, but because they had nothing else. Others refused. They'd rather fire blind than become a glowing target for a Panther's gunner. A few tanks, the lucky ones, mounted internal mirrors, small and rigid, fixed at the sweet spot of 350 yards. But combat doesn't care about sweet spots. Panthers don't wait for ideal range. By the end of September, 4th Armored had stopped collecting mirrors. They stopped training loaders to hold them. They stopped pretending the technique was sustainable. But in that brief window, 6 days, 47 tanks used the mirror method. They accounted for 38 confirmed kills. And the life expectancy of an American Sherman crew in the dead zone doubled. It wasn't a revolution. It wasn't a miracle. It was a patch. A battlefield bandage made of glass and duct tape. But sometimes, that's all you have. And sometimes, that's just enough. But even those new tanks had limits. In the Korean hills and alleyways, At 200 yards or less, optics still struggled. Sightlines still failed. And tankers still died trying to hit targets they couldn't see properly. No one mentioned the mirror. No one dug up Carson's report. Not until 1997. That year, a retired Army colonel named Janice Rothschild was researching a book on improvised battlefield innovations. She'd been combing through after-action reports from the European theater, cross-referencing combat performance with field modifications, looking for patterns, the little things that changed the outcome of battles, but never made it into history books. She found the report on page 417, same place Hayes had decades earlier. She read it 3 times. Then she flew to Pittsburgh. Eddie Kowalski was 73, retired steelworker, lived in a 2-story brick house on the edge of town. When Rothschild knocked on his door, he answered in slippers, holding a cup of coffee. She introduced herself, said she was writing about tankers. He invited her in. In the basement, behind boxes of Christmas decorations and old tools, he found the shoebox. Inside, a cracked mirror, wrapped in oilcloth, still smudged with soot, still bearing a faint fingerprint in one corner. Rothschild held it like an artifact. "You know what this is?" she asked. "It's what I had," Kowalski said. "Nothing more." She nodded. "But it worked." He shrugged. For a little while. Rothschild told his story, and the story of Carson's report, in a chapter titled Fighting Blind, Mirrors in the Dead Zone. The book, Steel and Smoke, Improvised Tactics of World War II, came out in 1999. It won no awards, sold modestly, but one copy ended up in the hands of a director at the U.S. Army Armor School in Fort Moore, Georgia. 2 years later, they added a short lecture to their training curriculum, Field Innovation in Combat Conditions, Case Study, M4 Mirror Technique, 4th Armored Division, September 1944. It's still taught today, and in a glass display at the Armor School's museum sits a small cracked mirror, 5 inches across, mounted next to a placard that reads, Improvised Gunner Sight, M4 Sherman, 4th Armored Division. Used in the Battle of Aricourt, September 1944. Operator, PFC Edward Kowalski. Outcome, 3 tanks destroyed in 4 minutes. Lesson, when doctrine fails, innovation fights back. No medals were given. No ceremony was held. But in that museum, surrounded by steel giants and polished brass, the cheapest, most fragile thing in the building, a broken mirror, tells the story of one man, one moment, and one impossible shot that changed everything. They found 3 reasons. First, stigma. Soldiers didn't trust that high command would take field modification seriously, especially when those solutions looked unprofessional. A mirror taped to a tank periscope? An oil can as a suppressor? These didn't look like battlefield innovations. They looked like hacks. And in a military culture built on hierarchy and standardization, hacks didn't earn medals. They earned reprimands. So soldiers kept quiet. Second, chaos. The pace of war made documentation hard. Reports were rushed, paperwork lost, units moved or destroyed before they could write anything down. Commanders focused on survival, not record-keeping. After-action reports, when they existed, prioritized objectives, casualties, equipment status, not creative problem-solving by privates under fire. Third, doctrine. The military was slow to adapt. New ideas had to move through layers of bureaucracy, testing, procurement. A field fix that worked in September might be obsolete by October. The war moved faster than the system. The system couldn't keep up, but the soldiers could. Eddie Kowalski never wrote a memoir. He never told his grandkids the mirror story. He probably thought it didn't matter. Just something he did one time, in one fight, on one day in France. Nothing heroic. Just a desperate man using what he had. But it mattered. It mattered because it was true. It mattered because it worked. It mattered because for 4 minutes on September 17, 1944, in the mud outside Error, a loader with no gunnery training picked up a broken mirror and did something no manual ever taught him. He adapted. And because of that, the men in his tank lived. History rarely records those kinds of stories. But it should. In September 1944, American Sherman tanks were being destroyed at close range, victims of a fatal design flaw cruise called the Dead Zone. The gun sights couldn't see targets under 400 yards. When a Panzer appeared that close, the Sherman was blind. Then, Outside the French village of Error, a 22-year-old loader named Eddie Kowalski reached down in desperation and grabbed the only thing he could, a cracked bathroom mirror. He angled it over the site, caught a glimpse of the enemy's lower hull, and fired. 3 German panzers destroyed. For minutes. 1 mirror. His improvised trick spread through the 4th Armored Division overnight. By the end of the month, 87 enemy tanks were burning. But the army never made it official. No manuals. No medals. The mirror was thrown away. The story almost vanished with it. Until now. That cracked mirror didn't just save Eddie Kowalski's life. It saved his crew, his battalion, maybe his entire division. Not because it was high-tech. Because it worked. Because when official solutions failed, soldiers made their own. They always have. They always will. The mirror is gone now, buried in a landfill. But the lesson endures. Innovation doesn't always come from labs or blueprints. Sometimes it comes from the turret of a burning tank, from a kid with shaking hands and no options left, from someone who refuses to accept that a problem can't be solved. Eddie Kowalski picked up a piece of broken glass and changed the course of a battle. For minutes. 3 panzers. 1 mirror. Sometimes, that's all it takes.